Hello, it's Dr. Bettina here. So a family have written into Nip in the Bud who have a son who's quite anxious and he's finding school very upsetting. The letter says that they are close to school refusal and the parent wants to know how they can support their son. So what a difficult situation this is. I always think one of the hardest things we're managing as parents is how much do we push children to do things that they're struggling with and how much do we protect them? And this is always a balance that we're trying to work out. So let's think about this difficulty here. And first of all, remind ourselves a little bit about what we know about anxiety. So first of all, anxiety is normal, it is adaptive, and it's even a very helpful emotion. Anxiety is an alarm that goes off in our brain that tells us that we need to be careful or we need to kind of avoid a situation that might be dangerous to us. So that is a good thing, but some people learn to respond with a fear response to anxiety. And there is a genetic loading on this, so it may be that it runs in your family to be a little bit more anxious than others, or sometimes somebody has had a life event that have been very frightening or traumatic for them. But anxiety becomes very unhelpful when there is no need to feel that anxious or the degree of anxiety is much too big for the situation in which you're in. The other thing we know about anxiety is that it drives us towards avoidance. When we are anxious about something, we want to avoid it. But anxiety and avoidance go together all the time. But avoidance gives you a short-term relief, but it is rarely a good long-term solution to the problem. Actually, the more you avoid something, the more your brain begins to believe that actually it was more scary and it was worth avoiding in the first place. So avoiding school is unlikely to be the best solution to this problem here. In fact, there's very good data that the longer a child is out of school, the harder it is to get them back into school. So what we would usually say is to really try and get on top of this as early as possible and stop the refusal even before it starts, if possible. So let's say you have this child who is saying they're anxious and they want to school refuse. The first thing I would do is to make space for a good conversation. So in this conversation, you really want to focus on curiosity and compassion. So really digging into what is going on, asking lots of follow-up questions, listening and validating, not judging or coming in with fixing, but just saying, tell me a bit more. Tell me what's happening. When does the anxiety feel worse for you? What are the things that make it feel better? And what you might find when you make space for that conversation with the child is that you really get a lot more information about what's going on. What actually is making them anxious? Was it that the teacher shouted at them? Is it that their friends are leaving them out? Are they kind of scared of going to the loo or something like that? I mean, there's a lot of detail you might get if you can have this conversation with the child, and then you have a good solution and you can go into school and you can talk with the teacher about what you can do to make adjustments to the environment, if possible, to help with the anxiety. Now, if you have a child who is out of school and you really want to get them back into school in some way, or even if they're on the verge of school refusing, here are some tips. First of all, you want to make a really good plan, and this plan needs to be in collaboration with the teacher. The devil is in the detail here. You want the child to know what's going to happen when. So if they're going in for the first time, try to make sure it's something, an activity that's enjoyable for them. Try and tell them exactly what's going to happen, who's going to be there to meet them, what's the lesson going to be, what's going to happen at the end of the lesson. Make a plan for what they could do if they're feeling a little bit overwhelmed. So you want to think about desirability and predictability. The second thing is thinking about a phased return. So it may be that you gradually need to expose the child to school again if they've been out of school for a bit of time. So anxiety naturally reduces over time as we are in the situation that we're scared of. So you need to begin to get the child back into school, and then their brain will begin to learn that maybe it's not as anxiety a provoking place as their brain is telling them in bed at night when they're ruminating that it is. The other thing that could be really helpful is to make some strong connections with children in school. Social connections, very important for all of us as human beings. So if the child is not in school, maybe invite some other children around. Maybe you'll have quite a structured play date, or do something really nice with them so that it's quite successful, and that will build that social connection, which could be really helpful. And then the other thing that I think we need to be careful of is if the child is at home and they're having a day at home, try to avoid kind of positively reinforcing that. And what I mean is try to make sure it's not too fun. I mean, obviously you're not going to be unkind or make it really difficult for them, but I would say, look, you're at home, but there aren't going to be any screens. We're not going to watch telly. We're going to do other things. Otherwise it can just become a little bit too comfortable, and that can be very positively reinforcing. Now, every child is different, and we know that children who are neurodiverse, so in particular kids who have an autism spectrum disorder or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, often are not able to cope with a typical school or classroom environment in the same way as other children. So it's important that you identify that. If you've done all of these things and the child is still struggling, it might be worth seeking an assessment to see if there's anything else going on in terms of neurodiversity. So just to summarize, here are the 3 C's. I'm going to come back to these 3 C's a lot with these letters. And the first one is being really curious. Tell me more. I really want to know what's going on. The second is being compassionate. Wow, that sounds really hard. I can see that you're struggling with that. And the third one is being really courageous. And with anxiety, I think we often are quite good at validating and being compassionate, but you've also got to couple it with saying to your child, you've got this. I really think you can do this. So that's the courage bit, and trying to, hold a kind but firm boundary. So really good luck with that. And please do send in any other questions you have, and we will do our best to offer some possible solutions.